Good morning, Heather.
I'm betting you didn't get a lot of sleep processing the result and what happened. So why don't we start there? How have you seen it, Philippe?
Well, it's very interesting to when we break down the numbers this morning, Heather. Of course, we were projecting the most likely scenario as a short liberal majority, and these seem to be short of that mark this morning. And when we break it down by regions, we see how well the forecast did, except in parts of Ontario where the Conservatives overperformed. And especially, Heather, it's with the Conservatives who benefited from the collapse of the NDP in the province.
In Ontario. That's really interesting. Right. So was that what might have been happening, Philippe, that was going on that you didn't pick up in the polling?
Well, I would say this, when we look at the polls, and of course I will have a full breakdown soon because not all pollsters are created equal, but when we look at the Conservative result, around 41%, this matches the best polls for the Conservatives and it beats the average of polls. I had 39% for the Conservatives, they had 41, and that small little change was all concentrated in Ontario. When we look at the results in Atlantic Canada, the projections and polls were right on. In Quebec, they were fantastically precise. I had 42 seats for the Liberals, they won 43. And same thing in British Columbia. But it really is in Ontario, especially I pointed to the Niagara region and also the York region just north of Toronto, where the Conservatives beat the expectations, and that stopped the Liberals from reaching the majority threshold, at least for now.
So that's really interesting because one of the questions, of course, is the Canadian voters' trust or distrust of polling, and in this particular case, we've seen that it's borne out. It was at the end of January we started to see the Conservative support, which had been so huge, begin to evaporate, and then toward the end of the campaign, there was the tightening in terms of Liberal Conservative support, and that was borne out in the end, wasn't it, Philippe?
Absolutely. No, there's no doubt about this. The tightening was modest. It's important to say it. So it may have been a lot of fluctuations in the numbers, but we see that the Conservatives closed the gap in Ontario, and it made all the difference. Now, of course, Mark Carney has a victory with 168 seats at this moment. I know there's a few seats that are not called yet, but with 168, it's a strong minority, and it could provide potentially a stable government. For the simple reason is that to take down the Liberals, all the opposition parties would have to get together and agree to take down the Liberals. And so right now, even though the NDP is weaker in this parliament for sure, then we have 6% and 7 seats, they hold the balance of power. And for the Bloc Québécois, also weaker in this parliament, they lost 10 seats, they hold the balance of power. So the Conservatives have reasons to be optimistic when they looked at the numbers 3 weeks ago. But as you said, Heather, when they look at the numbers from 3 months ago, they have to shake their heads and wonder what happened.
So there'll be a period of soul searching, one would imagine, and looking at the strategy and looking at the leader, because there were questions that were popping up in the polling about the riding of Carleton and indeed Pierre Poilievre losing the seat that he's held for more than 2 decades.
And I would have to say this is a surprise. And I know the Toronto Star and the Globe and Mail had reports that it was much closer than we thought in Carleton. My numbers showed that Poilievre losing in Carleton was not impossible, but it was very unlikely. And so all credit to the Liberal candidate, Mr. Fanjoy, managed to really cause a surprise here. And it will be interesting to see what the Conservatives choose to do. You heard Monsieur Poilievre in his speech. It seems like he wants to stay on. Seems like he wants to find a solution to stay in this parliament, but he cannot be in parliament to face Monsieur Carney in the House now.
You know, I'm just wondering, all of the things that we talked about and were thinking of over the course of the campaign, Philippe, a region that may be absolutely crucial, turnout as an issue, the age gap, the gender gap that became apparent over the course of the campaign. Are any of those sort of subplots, have they stood out for you in the result as you've seen them?
Well, the age gap was very different from one poll to another. So we'll have to do more study and a deep dive on this. We remember that in the younger crowd was much more conservatives than the average Canadian. However, that gap was reduced in the last days of the campaign. The gender gap certainly was a big story. But again, I'm going back to regions. British Columbia voted pretty much exactly how we forecasted. Atlantic Canada, Quebec as well. I wonder what happened in Ontario, why the Liberals dropped the balls in York and Niagara.
So interesting. So we go online to 338 Canada. We'll find your latest analysis piece coming up soon. Is that right?
That's correct this morning. Yes. Absolutely.
Okay. I'll look forward to the read. Thank you for the time. I always look forward to the conversations. Thanks, Philippe.
Thank you, Heather. Have a great day.
You too, Philippe Fournier, polls analyst, the editor-in-chief of 338 Canada.